The transport ship docked at Galactic Defense Station Omega-7 with a sound that made the metal walls shake. Director stood in the main hangar, her 3 eyes watching as the cargo bay doors opened. She did not like what she was about to see. The message had been clear. Commander Hal of the military was bringing something dangerous for training exercises. Hal walked down the ramp first. He was tall, even for a with 4 arms and skin that looked like blue crystal. Behind him came 6 soldiers, all carrying heavy weapons. They moved carefully, watching the massive container that floated behind them on gravity locks. The container was 15 feet tall and made of reinforced metal that could survive a ship crash. Inside the container, something moved. Felt her stomach tighten. She had run this station for 12 years and had seen many dangerous things. But the way Hal's soldiers kept their distance from that container told her this was different. "Director," Hal said, his voice formal, "thank you for allowing us to use your facilities. I trust Bay 12 is prepared." "It is," replied. "Though I must say your message was not very detailed. What exactly have you brought to my station?" Hal smiled, showing too many teeth. "A training opportunity. My team has secured one of the last surviving Void Reapers. We will use it to test our combat readiness against Galaxy-class threats." Went very still. A Void Reaper? Commander, those creatures were designed by the Empire to destroy entire planets. They killed billions before that empire fell. Why would you bring one here? "Because my soldiers need to train against the worst threats the galaxy has ever seen," Hal said. "The creature is completely controlled. We have kept it sedated and compliant for 3 years. There is no danger." Wanted to argue, but Hal was already moving toward Bay 12. His soldiers guided the container through the station corridors. Other station personnel stopped to watch, pressing themselves against the walls as it passed. Something about the container made people want to stay far away, even though they could not see what was inside. Bay 12 was one of the largest cargo bays on the station. It had been designed to hold dangerous materials and could be sealed off from the rest of the station in case of emergency. Hal's team positioned the container in the center and began setting up additional energy barriers. When they finally opened the container, understood why her instincts had been screaming at her to run. The Void Reaper stood 12 feet tall. Its body was covered in black plating that looked like volcanic glass. Rows of teeth filled its mouth, each one sharp and crystalline. Its eyes glowed with a red light that seemed to see everything. The creature was chained at the neck, wrists, and ankles with energy bonds that hummed with power. But worse than its appearance was the feeling it created. Just being near the creature made hearts race with fear. The Void Reaper gave off something, a chemical or energy that made every survival instinct scream danger. Even Hal's trained soldiers looked nervous. "As you can see," Hal said proudly, "we have everything under control. The creature responds to pain compliance. If it disobeys, we activate the neural collar. It learns quickly." Notice the scars on the Void Reaper's body, old wounds that had healed badly. The creature's claws were cracked and damaged. Its movements were stiff, like something that lived in constant pain. She felt sick. "I will need to file a report about this," she said. "And I will need someone to assess the creature's containment requirements. We have protocols for dangerous cargo." "Unnecessary," Hal said sharply. "My team handles all aspects of the creature's maintenance." "This is my station, Commander," said, her voice firm. "And I follow regulations. Someone will inspect the containment, or you can take your creature somewhere else." Hal's crystal skin darkened with anger, but he nodded. "Fine, send whoever you want. They will see that everything is in order." Left the bay and went straight to her office. She pulled up the station roster, looking for someone qualified to handle exotic and dangerous creatures. The name that appeared made her pause. Chris Martinez, head of exotic biology and creature care. A human. Had nothing against humans. They were good workers, smart and creative, but they were also unpredictable. Humans came from a cold Earth where everything tried to kill everything else. That environment had made them tough, but it had also made them strange. They had odd ideas about creatures that other species found dangerous. Still, Chris was the most qualified person on the station. She sent him a message asking him to report to Bay 12 for an assessment. Chris arrived 30 minutes later, carrying a tablet and a metal thermos that knew held coffee. Humans loved coffee the way loved meditation pools. Chris was in his 30s, with brown skin and dark hair pulled back in a simple style. He wore a worn jumpsuit with several pockets full of tools and snacks. "You wanted to see me, Director?" Chris asked. "I need you to assess a new arrival in Bay 12, said. "But I should warn you, it is extremely dangerous. A Void Reaper from the old Empire." Chris blinked. "A Void Reaper? I have read about those. I thought they were all dead." "Apparently not. The military has one, and they want to use it for combat training. I need you to make sure the containment meets our safety standards." "Sure, I can do that," Chris said, taking a sip from his thermos. "Anything I should know about its current condition?" Hesitated. "They have kept it controlled through pain compliance for 3 years. It may be aggressive." Something changed in Chris's expression, but he just nodded. "Understood. I will go take a look." When Chris entered Bay 12, Hal and his soldiers were running equipment checks. The Void Reaper stood in its cage, perfectly still. Its glowing eyes tracked every movement in the room. "Who are you?" Hal demanded when he saw Chris. "Chris Martinez, Exotic Biology," Chris said calmly. "I am here to assess your creature's containment and welfare needs." "Welfare?" Hal laughed. "It is a weapon, not a pet. It does not need welfare." Chris did not respond. He walked toward the cage, studying the Void Reaper with professional interest. The other soldiers tensed, hands moving toward their weapons. The fear pheromone rolling off the creature was enough to make most people turn and run. Chris seemed completely unbothered. He circled the cage slowly, making notes on his tablet. He looked at the energy bonds, the damaged claws, the scars on the creature's body. The Void Reaper watched him, its head turning to follow his movement. Its breathing was controlled, calculating. "When did it eat last?" Chris asked. "This morning," one of the soldiers said. "Standard nutrition paced." "How much?" "Half ration. We keep it slightly hungry so it stays motivated for training." Chris stopped walking. He turned to look at Hal. "You keep a 12-foot predator hungry on purpose." "It makes the creature more aggressive for combat simulations," Hal said. Chris set down his tablet. He pulled a wrapped sandwich from one of his pockets and took a bite. Then he looked at the Void Reaper and spoke directly to it. "Are you hungry?" The bay went completely silent. Every soldier stared at Chris like he had lost his mind. The Void Reaper tilted its head, and for the first time since arriving at the station, it made a sound. A low, rumbling growl that made the floor vibrate. Chris pulled a protein pack from another pocket and walked up to the cage. The soldiers started to move forward, but Hal held up one hand to stop them. He wanted to see what the foolish human would do. Chris found the feeding slot in the cage and slid the protein pack through. The Void Reaper stared at it, then at Chris. Its eyes were full of suspicion and confusion. In 3 years, no one had given it anything without pain following immediately after. Slowly, the creature reached out and took the food. It sniffed it carefully, then ate it in 2 bites. Its eyes never left Chris. "There," Chris said quietly. "That is better, is it not?" The Void Reaper made another sound, softer this time. Chris nodded as if the creature had answered a question. He picked up his tablet and turned to Hal. "I will need to file a full report on the containment conditions. There are several violations of basic creature welfare protocols. Malnutrition, untreated injuries, and psychological stress indicators. This needs to be addressed before any training exercises begin." Director read Chris's report 3 times before calling Commander Hal to her office. The officer arrived quickly, his forearms crossed in a gesture of barely controlled anger. "You cannot be serious about this," Hal said before could even speak. "That human wants to delay my training schedule because the weapon is uncomfortable." "The report cites 12 separate violations of galactic creature welfare standards," said, sliding the tablet across her desk. "Malnutrition, untreated medical conditions, and what Chris describes as severe psychological trauma from pain-based control methods. "It is a Void Reaper, not a house pet," Hal snapped. "Those creatures destroyed civilizations. They were designed to kill. Pain is the only thing they understand." "Perhaps," said carefully, "but this station has rules, and those rules say that any living being kept here must meet minimum welfare standards. Until those conditions are met, I cannot authorize combat training exercises." Hal's crystal skin darkened to almost black. "This is ridiculous. My team has controlled that creature for 3 years with no incidents. Now one human with soft ideas comes in and everything must change." "The decision is made, Commander. Chris Martinez has temporary authority over the Void Reaper's care until it is deemed stable enough for training. You and your team will cooperate with him." Hal left the office without another word, watched him go and wondered if she had just made a terrible mistake. But she had read the regulations herself, and Chris was right. No matter how dangerous the creature was, they had standards to follow. In Bay 12, Chris returned with a cart full of supplies. The soldiers watched him with a mix of confusion and contempt. One of them, a younger warrior named Dex, stepped forward. "The commander says we must allow you to work with the creature," Dex said. "But if it kills you, that is not our responsibility." "Understood," Chris said simply. He began unloading equipment from the cart. Medical scanners, nutritional supplements, environmental controls, and several sealed containers of food. "You are really going in there?" another soldier asked. "That is the plan," Chris said. He checked his tablet, reviewing the biological data he had collected earlier. The Void Reaper species had evolved on a world with very specific conditions: high gravity, dim light, and a diet rich in certain minerals. That had kept it in bright lights and fed it generic nutrition paste. No wonder the creature was aggressive. Chris approached the cage. The Void Reaper was in the same position as before, standing perfectly still. But its eyes tracked Chris from the moment he entered the bay. The creature recognized him, the human who had given it food. "Hey there," Chris said quietly. "I am going to need to come inside for a bit. I want to check that injury on your left side. Is that okay with you?" The Void Reaper did not move. Chris took that as permission. He entered the access code Hal had been forced to provide and stepped through the energy barrier into the cage. Every soldier in the bay raised their weapons. Chris heard Dex shouting something about protocols. He ignored them all. His attention was completely on the creature in front of him. Up close, the Void Reaper was even more impressive. Its black plating had patterns etched into it, like natural armor that had evolved over millions of years. Its claws, though damaged, were works of biological engineering, and its eyes held an intelligence that made Chris's heart ache. This was not a mindless killing machine. This was a thinking, feeling being that had suffered for years. "I am going to scan you now," Chris said, holding up the medical scanner. "It will not hurt, I promise." The Void Reaper watched the device but did not attack. Chris slowly moved the scanner over the creature's body, studying the readouts on his tablet. The results were worse than he thought. 3 partially healed fractures, chronic pain in the joints, malnutrition affecting bone density, stress hormones at dangerous levels. "They really did a number on you, did they not?" Chris said softly. He set down the scanner and pulled out one of the food containers. Inside was a mixture he had prepared specifically for the Void Reaper's biology. Protein-rich meat from the station's stores, mixed with mineral supplements and natural enzymes. He opened the container and set it on the floor. The smell filled the cage immediately. The Void Reaper's nostrils flared. Its whole body went tense. "Go ahead," Chris said, stepping back. "It is yours." For a long moment, the creature did not move. It stared at the food, then at Chris, as if waiting for the punishment it knew must be coming. When nothing happened, it slowly lowered its head and began to eat. Chris had seen many hungry animals in his career, but nothing like this. The Void Reaper ate with desperate intensity, like it believed the food might disappear at any moment. When the container was empty, it looked at Chris with those glowing red eyes, and something passed between them. Understanding. The beginning of trust. "Tomorrow I will bring more," Chris said, "and we will work on getting those injuries treated. Sound good?" The Void Reaper made a low rumbling sound. Not a growl this time, something else. Chris smiled. Over the next week, Chris spent hours every day in the cage. He brought better food, adjusted the lighting to match the creature's natural preferences, and began physical therapy for the injuries. The Void Reaper cooperated with everything. The soldiers watching were amazed. The creature that had required pain compliance to obey simple commands now followed Chris's instructions without any force at all. Hal watched it all with growing frustration. His team had spent 3 years breaking this creature, teaching it to fear and obey. Now one human was undoing all of that work with food and gentle words. It was insulting. "It is only cooperating because it is waiting for an opportunity to strike," Hal told his soldiers. "The human thinks he has tamed it, but he is just making it comfortable before it kills him." But as the days passed, even that explanation seemed weak. The change in the Void Reaper was obvious to everyone. It moved differently now, with less pain. Its eyes were clearer. It still gave off the fear pheromone, but not as strongly. And most surprising of all, it seemed to actively seek Chris's company. One evening, Chris stayed late in the bay to finish some paperwork. He sat outside the cage with his back against the wall, typing notes into his tablet. The Void Reaper approached the energy barrier and settled down on the other side, mirroring his position. "Long day?" Chris asked without looking up. "Yeah, me too. Supply department is giving me trouble about the food costs. Apparently feeding you properly is expensive." The Void Reaper made a questioning rumble. Chris glanced at it and smiled. "Do not worry about it. I will figure something out. I always do." He continued working, occasionally commenting on what he was doing. Complaints about bureaucracy, jokes about the cafeteria food, observations about other creatures he had worked with. The Void Reaper listened to all of it, its head tilted slightly. Chris pulled a small bag from his pocket and took out a piece of dried fruit. He popped it in his mouth, then noticed the Void Reaper watching intently. On impulse, he pulled out another piece and held it up. "Wanna try? It is from Earth. My grandmother used to make these." He tossed the fruit through the barrier. The Void Reaper caught it easily and examined it carefully. Then it ate the fruit and made a soft sound that might have been approval. "Yeah, she was a great cook," Chris said. "I miss her food. Station rations are not quite the same." They sat together in comfortable silence, human and monster, sharing space at the end of a long day. The soldiers on duty watched through the monitors and said nothing. They did not understand what was happening, but they could see it was something they had never witnessed before. 2 days later, everything changed. Chris arrived at the bay in the morning to find Hal and a full squad of soldiers waiting for him. "The creature has been coddled long enough," Hal announced. "Training exercises begin today. We have observers coming from 6 different military branches. My team will demonstrate proper combat protocols against Galaxy-class threats." "It is not ready," Chris said immediately. "The psychological damage runs deep. Putting it in a combat situation could trigger a complete breakdown." "That is not your decision," Hal said coldly. "Director has agreed that we have waited long enough. The creature's physical health has improved. That was your job. Now we do ours." Chris wanted to argue, but he could see standing near the entrance with several high-ranking military observers. She looked uncomfortable but determined. The political pressure must have been enormous. "Fine," Chris said, "but I want monitoring access. If the situation becomes dangerous, I am pulling the plug on the exercise." "Agreed," said quickly, before Hal could object. "You will have full access to see the Void Reaper moved like liquid shadow across the arena floor. One moment it stood in the center, the next it was behind 2 of Hal's soldiers. The warriors barely had time to turn before the creature struck, not to kill, but to disable. Its claws swept low, taking out legs. Its tail whipped around, catching weapons and sending them flying. In the control booth, the observers leaned forward. This was what they had come to see, a galaxy killer in action. "Team 2, flank left," Hal commanded through the communication system. "Team 1, suppressing fire." Energy bolts filled the arena, all carefully calibrated to stun rather than kill. The Void Reaper dodged most of them with impossible speed. The few that connected seemed to barely slow it down. The creature had been engineered to survive planetary bombardment. Non-lethal training weapons were annoying at best. Chris watched with growing alarm. The Void Reaper was not fighting like the calm, thoughtful being he had spent weeks with. This was pure survival instinct. Its eyes were wild, unfocused. Its movements were efficient but desperate. Every successful dodge, every strike against the soldiers, was pushing it deeper into a state that Chris recognized from his studies. Combat shock. The creature was spiraling. "You need to stop this," Chris said to Hal. "Look at its behavior patterns. It is not thinking anymore. It is just reacting." "Exactly as designed," Hal said, not taking his eyes off the arena. "A Void Reaper in full combat mode is unstoppable. This is what my soldiers need to learn." "It is going to hurt someone," Chris warned. "My warriors can handle it." In the arena, the Void Reaper had taken down 4 soldiers. Only 2 remained standing, and they were backing away, trying to coordinate their next move. The creature stalked toward them, breathing hard. Its fear pheromone had intensified to the point where both soldiers were visibly shaking. Then something changed. The Void Reaper stopped moving forward. Its head tilted like it was listening to something. For a brief moment, its eyes cleared and Chris saw recognition there. The creature remembered where it was, who these people were, what was happening. It was fighting the spiral, trying to hold onto itself. "Please," Chris said quietly, watching the struggle play out. "Let me stop this." But before Hal could respond, one of the remaining soldiers panicked. He switched his weapon to lethal mode and fired. The energy bolt caught the Void Reaper in the shoulder, burning through its armor plating. Real pain, real danger. The creature roared, and the sound shook the entire dome. All pretense of control vanished. This was no longer a training exercise. The Void Reaper's survival programming took over completely. It moved toward the soldier who had heard it, and its intent was clear. It was going to kill. Chris did not think. He moved on pure instinct. His hands flew across the control panel, overriding the safety locks on the arena entrance. Alarms blared. Hal shouted something, but Chris was already running. He hit the door at full speed and burst into the arena. Behind him, he could hear screaming his name. The observers were yelling about protocols and safety procedures. None of it mattered. He had one chance to stop this before people died. The Void Reaper had the soldier pinned against the wall, one massive claw raised for a killing strike. The other warriors were down, unconscious or too injured to move. Chris ran across the arena floor, his boots echoing in the sudden silence. "Stop," he called out. Not a command, just a simple word. The Void Reaper froze. Its head turned toward Chris, and for a moment he saw absolutely nothing in those glowing eyes. No recognition, no thought, just predatory calculation. Chris kept walking. Every survival instinct screamed at him to run, to hide, to do anything except approach a galaxy killer that was lost in combat rage. He ignored all of it. He had made a promise to this creature. He would not break it now. "It is me," Chris said calmly. "Remember, I am the one who brings you food, who talks to you about boring paperwork, who gave you that dried fruit you liked." The Void Reaper's breathing was ragged. Its claws flexed. The soldier beneath it whimpered. Chris stopped walking. He reached into his pocket, moving slowly so the creature could see every motion. He pulled out his thermos and unscrewed the cap. The smell of fresh coffee filled the arena. Then he reached into another pocket and pulled out a small container. "I brought snacks," Chris said. "Thought you might be hungry after all this." He sat down on the arena floor, right there in the open, completely vulnerable. Every camera in the station was recording this moment. Every observer in the control booth had gone silent. Chris poured himself a cup of coffee and took a sip, like he was on his lunch break. Then he opened the container. Inside was the protein mixture the Void Reaper had come to associate with safety and kindness. The smell reached the creature immediately. Time seemed to stop. The Void Reaper stood perfectly still, one claw raised above the terrified soldier, the other reaching toward Chris and the food. Its mind was caught between two states, the programming that said kill and the memory that said trust. Chris did not move. He just sat there, holding the container, waiting. The Void Reaper made a sound, not a roar or a growl, something broken and confused. Its raised claw began to tremble. Then, slowly, it pulled back from the soldier. Its glowing eyes never left Chris as it crossed the arena floor. When it reached him, the creature sank down to the ground. It was still huge, still terrifying, but now it looked lost, like a child who had woken from a nightmare and did not know where it was. Chris set the food container between them. "It is okay," he said softly. "You are safe. I am here. Nothing is going to hurt you." The Void Reaper reached out and took the food with shaking claws. It ate slowly this time, not with the desperate hunger of before. Its eyes stayed on Chris the whole time. "That is it," Chris said. "Take your time, we have all day." Around them, unconscious soldiers lay scattered across the arena floor. Emergency lights flashed. Alarms still blared. But in the center of all that chaos, a human and a monster sat together, sharing a meal. In the control booth, no one spoke. They had all just witnessed something that should have been impossible. A civilian had stopped a galaxy killer with a cup of coffee and a gentle voice. Hal stood frozen, his forearms hanging limp. His entire understanding of how to handle dangerous creatures had just been proven completely wrong. Was the first to move. She opened the emergency communication channel. "Medical teams to the arena. We have injured soldiers. And someone get Chris Martinez a blanket. He looks cold." The medical teams rushed in carefully, keeping their distance from the Void Reaper. The creature watched them but made no aggressive moves. Chris had positioned himself between the medical teams and the Void Reaper, one hand resting lightly on the creature's arm. As long as he was calm, the creature stayed calm. It took an hour to evacuate all the injured soldiers. None of them were dead, though several would need serious medical attention. The soldier who had switched to lethal force would face discipline, but he would live. The Void Reaper had been half a second from killing him when Chris intervened. When the arena was finally clear except for Chris and the Void Reaper, entered personally. She moved slowly, hands visible and empty. The creature tracked her movement but did not react with hostility. "Chris," she said carefully, "are you all right?" "I am fine," Chris said. He looked tired but steady. "Is everyone else okay?" "Injuries but no deaths. You saved that soldier's life." She paused. "You also violated about 15 safety protocols and scared me badly." "Sorry about that," Chris said. He did not sound very sorry. Looked at the Void Reaper. Up close, she could see how the creature leaned slightly toward Chris, like a massive predator seeking comfort from the only being who had shown it kindness. It was remarkable and terrifying in equal measure. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we need to talk about proper training protocols," Chris said firmly. "Because whatever Hal was doing does not work. You cannot torture a creature into cooperation and expect it to stay stable under stress." "I think Commander Hal is done giving orders about this creature," said. "The military observers saw everything. They are already filing reports." She looked at Chris seriously. "They are going to ask me how a human civilian managed to control a Void Reaper when trained warriors could not. What should I tell them?" Chris was quiet for a moment. He looked at the creature beside him, at the intelligence in its eyes and the trust it had placed in him despite years of pain. "Tell them I did not control it," Chris said finally. "I just treated it like a person instead of a weapon. Everything else followed from that." Nodded slowly. "The galaxy is not going to know what to do with you humans. You know that, right?" "Yeah," Chris said, a small smile crossing his face. "We get that a lot." The next day, Commander Hal was formally relieved of his command over the Void Reaper project. He left the station in disgrace, his career damaged but not destroyed. Before he left, he stopped by Bay 12 one last time. Chris was there, as always, sitting outside the cage while the Void Reaper rested inside. Hal looked at them both for a long moment. "I do not understand you," Hal said finally. That creature is dangerous. It killed billions in the old wars. How can you sit there so calmly? Chris considered the question. It killed billions because it was created to kill and never given another choice. Every day since then, it has been hurt and controlled and treated like a thing. Yeah, it is dangerous, but that is not the same as being evil. What if you are wrong? Hal asked. What if one day it turns on you the hearing took place 3 days after the arena incident? A formal review board assembled in the station's main conference room. 6 officials from different galactic military branches sat at a long table, reviewing footage and testimony. Director presented the station's position. Chris sat in the back, watching calmly while people debated whether he was a hero or a fool. The representative was not Hal. They had sent someone else, a military psychologist named Al who specialized in combat creature management. She had reviewed all the footage multiple times. The human's actions were reckless, Al said, her voice formal. He violated safety protocols and placed himself in extreme danger. However, the results speak for themselves. 0 fatalities, and the creature returned to a calm state within minutes. The creature should never have reached that state in the first place, said another observer, a general. Commander Hal's training methods created the exact situation he claimed to be preventing. Because he used pain instead of partnership, Chris spoke up from the back. Everyone turned to look at him. Sorry, I know I am not supposed to talk unless asked, but this is important. Nodded for him to continue. Chris stood. The Void Reaper was designed by the Empire to be intelligent. Smart weapons are effective weapons, but intelligence means capacity for memory, for emotion, for choice. You cannot torture something that's smart and expect stable behavior. The creature was not malfunctioning in the arena. It was responding exactly as anyone would after years of abuse. So you believe the Void Reaper can be trusted? Al asked. I think trust is not something you give or receive. It is something you build, Chris said. And yes, I have been building that with this creature for weeks. It knows I will not hurt it, so it does not hurt me. One of the military observers, a veteran, leaned forward. You are asking us to believe that kindness is a viable strategy for controlling galaxy-class threats. Not controlling, Chris corrected. Cooperating with, there is a difference. The hearing continued for hours. Testimony from the injured soldiers, analysis from debate about the legal status of bioweapons. Finally, the review board made their decision. The Void Reaper would remain on the station under human supervision. Chris would be formally assigned as its primary handler, with support from the Xenobiology department. Hal's methods were officially condemned. The military issued a statement about updating their exotic creature protocols. It was a political victory for the more progressive factions in the galactic community. Chris did not care about any of that. He just wanted to make sure the Void Reaper would not be hurt anymore. The next 2 weeks were quiet. Chris continued his daily routine with the creature. Better food, medical treatment, environmental enrichment. The Void Reaper's health improved steadily. More importantly, its behavior changed. It became calmer, more engaged. It watched the station personnel with curiosity instead of hostility. One evening, Chris was teaching it simple communication. He would point at objects and say their names. The Void Reaper could not speak, but it could learn to understand. When Chris pointed at himself and said his name, the creature made a specific sound. When he pointed at food, it made a different sound. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Then the alarms went off. Chris's tablet lit up with an emergency alert. All personnel were ordered to emergency stations. He pulled up the details and his stomach dropped. A civilian transport ship had docked with critical engine failure. The reactor was unstable. Radiation was venting into the docking bay. The crew of 15 was trapped inside, and standard rescue protocols would take too long. They had maybe 20 minutes before the reactor went critical. Chris ran to the command center, was already there, coordinating evacuation of the surrounding sections. Military personnel were suiting up in radiation gear, but everyone could see the numbers. They would not reach the crew in time. We need someone who can survive extreme radiation and heat, said Lieutenant, a human military officer. Someone strong enough to tear through damaged hull plating. Everyone's eyes turned to Chris. He understood immediately. The Void Reaper could survive conditions that would kill any rescuer in seconds. Its biology was designed for exactly this kind of extreme environment. No, said immediately. Chris, you cannot be seriously considering this. It is the only option, Chris said, and I think it will help. You think, his voice rose. You want to ask a creature that was designed to destroy civilizations to rescue people, based on you thinking it will help. Yes, Chris said simply. He was already moving toward the door. I will take full responsibility. Wait, called after him, but Chris was already running toward Bay 12. When he reached the bay, the Void Reaper was agitated. It had heard the alarms and sensed the chaos through the station. Chris entered the cage without hesitation. I need your help, he said directly. There are people trapped, dangerous radiation, extreme heat. They will die if someone does not get them out. He pulled up images on his tablet. The damaged ship. The crew visible through cracked viewports. The countdown timer showing 18 minutes remaining. The Void Reaper looked at everything, its glowing eyes processing the information. I cannot do this alone, Chris said. But you can. Your body can handle environments I cannot survive. I need you to come with me and help save those people. The Void Reaper made a low sound. Chris had learned to recognize different tones. This one was uncertainty. The creature had never been asked to save lives before, only to take them. I know it is scary, Chris said quietly. I know you do not owe these people anything, but they need us, and I believe you can do this. He held out his hand. The Void Reaper looked at it, then at Chris's face. In that moment, everything they had built together came down to a single choice: trust or fear, partnership or programming. The Void Reaper reached out and touched Chris's hand with one careful claw. Agreement. They ran through the station together, Chris in heat-resistant gear and the Void Reaper at his side. Station personnel pressed themselves against walls as they passed, shocked to see the Galaxy Killer running free. But no one tried to stop them. The situation was too desperate. They reached the docking bay. The doors were sealed, but Chris had emergency override codes. When they opened, heat and radiation flooded out. Alarms screamed warnings about lethal exposure levels. Chris could feel the temperature even through his suit. The Void Reaper did not hesitate. It moved into the bay like it was walking through a cool room. Chris followed, staying close. Through the bay windows, he could see the damaged ship. Plasma vented from multiple hull breaches. The reactor core glowed white-hot through a crack in the containment chamber. There, Chris pointed. We need to get the crew out through the main airlock. Can you open it? The Void Reaper approached the ship. The heat intensified. Chris's suit began giving critical warnings. He had to stay back, but the creature could get closer. It examined the damaged airlock, then drove its claws into the metal. The sound was horrible, screeching metal and groaning support structures. But slowly, impossibly, the airlock tore open. Inside, the crew huddled together, protected by their ship's emergency shielding. They saw the Void Reaper and panicked. Some screamed. Others backed away toward the failing reactor. It is okay, Chris shouted through his suit speakers. It is here to help. You need to come with us now. A human woman in captain's uniform stared at him. You want us to trust a Void Reaper? Yes, Chris said. Right now, we have 12 minutes. The captain made a decision. She started moving her crew toward the opening. The Void Reaper backed up, giving them space. One by one, the crew emerged. Some were injured. One young was unconscious, being carried by two. We cannot carry him fast enough, one of them said desperately. The Void Reaper moved forward. Before anyone could react, it carefully picked up the unconscious in its arms. The creature's massive claws cradled him with surprising gentleness. Then it turned and started moving toward the bay exit. They made 3 trips. The heat increased with each one. Chris's suit was failing. Red warnings covered his display. But the Void Reaper showed no signs of distress. It moved through conditions that would vaporize most creatures, carrying injured crew members like they were precious cargo. On the final trip, Chris and the Void Reaper emerged with the last 2 crew members just as the ship's reactor reached critical. They dove through the bay doors. Chris hit the emergency seal, and the massive blast doors slammed shut just as the reactor exploded. The station shook. The bay doors held, but barely. When the shaking stopped, Chris lay on the floor, his suit smoking. The Void Reaper crouched over him, blocking him from any debris. Around them, the 15 crew members from the transport ship were safe. Medical teams rushed in. They checked everyone, treating burns and radiation exposure. The crew would recover. They had all survived because of a creature that was designed only to kill. Chris sat up slowly, pulling off his helmet. His face was flushed from the heat, but he was smiling. The Void Reaper sat beside him, breathing hard but clearly unharmed. Chris reached out and placed his hand on the creature's arm. "Thank you," he said simply. "You saved them, all of them." The Void Reaper made a sound Chris had never heard before. Soft and almost musical. The sound of a being discovering it could be something other than a weapon. The story of the rescue spread through galactic communication networks faster than anyone expected. A Void Reaper, one of the most feared weapons ever created, had saved 15 lives. News agencies picked it up. Military analysts debated what it meant, wrote papers. And everywhere, people asked the same question. If a galaxy killer could be rehabilitated, what did that say about the galaxy's approach to dangerous beings? On Station Omega-7, the changes were immediate. The crew no longer pressed themselves against walls when the Void Reaper passed. Some even nodded respectfully. The creature noticed the difference. It moved through the station with more confidence, less of the hunched defensive posture it had shown before. Chris found himself in a meeting with Director and several Galactic Council representatives. They sat in the conference room while data scrolled across displays. Reports from dozens of facilities that held dangerous creatures. Ancient bioweapons. Predators from dead worlds. Beings that had been locked away because no one knew what else to do with them. "We have received formal requests from 12 different agencies," said, sliding a tablet across the table. "They want to know if your methods could work with their creatures." Chris read through the list. Thorn stalkers, void crawlers, a quantum wraith that had been in containment for 50 years. Each entry represented a being that the galaxy had given up on. "What are you proposing?" Chris asked. "A new program," said Council representative, a diplomatic with skin and kind eyes. "Formally called the Sentient Threat Rehabilitation Initiative. We would establish it here, with you as director. The goal would be to assess dangerous creatures and determine if they can be safely rehabilitated." "And if they can?" Chris asked. "Then they get a choice," said. "Sanctuary world retirement or service work, helping with situations where their unique abilities could save lives. Like what happened with your Void Reaper." Chris sat back, thinking. It was a huge responsibility. But he thought about all those beings locked in cages, treated as things instead of people. If he could help even a few of them, it would be worth it. "I will do it," he said. "But I need resources, proper facilities, and I want to be very clear about something. This is not about making weapons useful. This is about giving traumatized beings a chance to heal and choose their own path." "Agreed," said. "The Council supports this fully." One of the military representatives, a general named Al, spoke up. "What about the risk? These are dangerous creatures. What if they cannot be rehabilitated?" "Then we keep them safe and comfortable for the rest of their lives," Chris said firmly. "But we do not give up on them, and we do not hurt them. Those are non-negotiable terms." Al studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. The military formally apologizes for Commander Hal's methods. We will be updating our protocols based on your work." The meeting ended with paperwork and logistics. Chris signed forms, reviewed budgets, and planned facility modifications. It was boring but necessary. When he finally left the conference room hours later, he was exhausted but satisfied. He found the Void Reaper in its bay, but the space looked different now. The cage was gone. In its place was an open area with comfortable resting spaces, climbing structures, and full freedom to move around. The Void Reaper sat on a raised platform, watching the stars through the viewport. "Hey," Chris said, climbing up to sit beside it. "We need to talk about something important." The creature turned its glowing eyes toward him, attentive. "You have been through a lot," Chris said. "More than anyone should have to endure. The Council wants to start a program to help others like you, creatures that have been hurt and locked away. But before we do that, I need to know what you want." He pulled up images on his tablet, a beautiful planet with forests and mountains. "This is Sanctuary 7, protected world. You could live there in peace. No more stations, no more people, just freedom. They would take care of you." The Void Reaper looked at the images, but made no sound. Chris showed another image, the station with various dangerous creatures in redesigned habitats. "Or you could stay here with me, help with the new program. Use your experience to help others who have been through what you went through. But that means more work, more stress, more being around people." He set down the tablet. "Either choice is okay. This is your life. You get to decide what you want to do with it." The Void Reaper was quiet for a long time. Chris waited patiently. Finally, the creature reached out and touched the tablet. It tapped the image of the station. Then it placed its claw over Chris's hand. Chris felt his throat tighten. "You want to stay, help others." The Void Reaper made its affirmative sound. The one Chris had learned meant yes. "Okay then," Chris said softly. "We do this together." 2 weeks later, the first new arrival came to the station. A thorn stalker that had been in military detention for 8 years. The creature was smaller than the Void Reaper, only about 6 feet tall, but it was all sharp edges and toxic spines. Its species had evolved as ambush predators on a jungle world. This particular one had been captured after attacking a research team, and it had been kept in isolation ever since. Chris stood in the new arrival bay, watching as the transport container was brought in. The thorn stalker inside snarled and thrashed against the walls. Its eyes were wild with fear and rage. The transport crew looked nervous. "It has been aggressive the entire journey," the crew leader said. "We had to keep it sedated for everyone's safety." "Understood," Chris said. "We will take it from here." After the transport crew left, Chris approached the container. The Void Reaper stood beside him, calm and watchful. The thorn stalker saw them and went absolutely still. Its predator instincts recognized the Void Reaper immediately. This was something far more dangerous than itself. "Hello," Chris said, speaking through the container's communication panel. "My name is Chris. This is my friend. We run a program here for creatures like you. Things are going to be different now." The thorn stalker hissed, showing rows of needle teeth. It did not believe him. 8 years had taught it that all strangers meant pain. Chris had expected this. He opened the feeding slot and slid through a container of fresh meat, specifically prepared for thorn stalker nutritional needs. The creature stared at it suspiciously. "It is not drugged," Chris said. "Not poisoned, just food. You must be hungry after the trip." The thorn stalker did not move toward the food. Chris nodded, understanding. Trust would take time. He sat down on the floor, pulled out his thermos, and poured himself some coffee. The Void Reaper settled beside him. "We have all the time in the world," Chris said conversationally. "No rush. When you are ready to eat, the food will be there. When you are ready to talk, I will listen. When you are ready to trust, we will be here." The thorn stalker watched them with confusion. The huge galaxy killer was just sitting there peacefully. The humans showed no fear. Nothing made sense according to everything the thorn stalker had learned in 8 years of captivity. Chris took a sip of coffee and started talking. He spoke about the station, about the new program, about the Void Reaper's journey from weapon to person. He explained that the thorn stalker would not be hurt here. No pain compliance. No starvation. No punishment. "I know you do not believe me yet," Chris said. "That is okay. I did not earn trust with promises. I earned it by keeping them. So here is my first promise. You will eat 3 good meals a day. Your habitat will be comfortable. And no one will hurt you. If I break that promise, you have every right to hate me, but I will not break it." He stood up, leaving the food container where it was. "I will come back in a few hours with dinner. Think about it." Chris and the Void Reaper left the bay. On the monitors, they watched as the Thorn Stalker stared at the door for several minutes. Then, very slowly, it approached the food. It sniffed carefully. Finally, it ate. Over the next month, Chris worked with the Thorn Stalker the same way he had worked with the Void Reaper. Patience, consistency, kindness. The creature fought him at every step. It hissed when he approached. It refused to cooperate with medical scans. It destroyed every enrichment item he introduced. But Chris did not give up, and neither did the Void Reaper. The larger creature would sit outside the Thorn Stalker's habitat, calm and peaceful, a living example that change was possible. Slowly, the Thorn Stalker began to trust. First, it stopped attacking the habitat walls. Then it started eating immediately when food arrived instead of waiting hours. Then it allowed Chris to enter the habitat while it was present. The breakthrough came 6 weeks after the Thorn Stalker's arrival. Chris was sitting in the habitat, working on his tablet. The Thorn Stalker approached cautiously and for the first time made a sound that was not aggressive, a questioning chirp. Chris looked up. "Hey there, need something?" The Thorn Stalker pointed at Chris's tablet with one spine-covered claw. Chris understood. It was curious about what he was doing. "Just reviewing supply requisitions," Chris said, showing the screen. "Really boring stuff, but necessary for keeping this place running." He spent the next hour explaining station operations to a creature that had never been treated like it could understand complex concepts. The Thorn Stalker listened to everything, its eyes sharp and intelligent. When Chris finally left that day, he found waiting outside the habitat. She had been watching through the monitors. "You really believe they can all be rehabilitated?" she asked. "Not all of them," Chris admitted. "Some are too damaged. Some might be genuinely dangerous no matter what we do. But most, I think most of them just need someone to see them as people instead of problems." "The galaxy is watching this program," said. "If it works, it could change how we handle dangerous beings everywhere. If it fails, then we learn from it and try something different," Chris said. "But we do not go back to the old way. Never again." 3 months after the program started, Chris stood in the main habitat area. 5 creatures now lived on the station. The Void Reaper, the Thorn Stalker, a quantum wraith that could phase through solid matter, a pair of shadow raptors that had been used as illegal fighting animals. All of them were healing. All of them were learning they could be something other than weapons or monsters. Chris watched them interact. The Void Reaper was teaching the younger creatures how to use the enrichment structures. The Thorn Stalker was showing surprising gentleness with the traumatized shadow raptors. The quantum wraith, which had spent 50 years in isolation, was finally learning what social interaction felt like. It was not perfect. There were setbacks, days when old trauma surfaced and progress seemed to vanish. But there was also growth, moments of joy, the slow building of trust and family among beings that had only known pain. A new transport was scheduled to arrive tomorrow, another creature that the galaxy had given up on. Chris pulled out his tablet and reviewed the file. A bone crusher from a military weapons program, extremely aggressive, recommended for termination by 3 different agencies. Chris sighed and made notes about dietary requirements and habitat setup. Then he checked his supply of coffee. He was going to need a lot of it. The Void Reaper approached and settled beside him. It made a questioning sound. Chris smiled. "Tomorrow we get a new friend," he said. "Going to be a tough one. Bone crushers have a bad reputation." The Void Reaper made a sound that Chris had learned meant understanding. It knew about bad reputations. "Yeah," Chris said, reaching out to rest his hand on the creature's arm. "But we had a bad reputation too once, did we not? Look at us now." Above them, stars shone through the viewport. Somewhere out there, agencies were closing down pain compliance programs. Military forces were rewriting their exotic creature protocols. And beings that had been locked in darkness for years were being loaded onto transports headed for a station where a human would ask if they wanted a snack first. The galaxy was learning, slowly and sometimes painfully, what Chris had always known. That monsters were not born. They were made. And what was made could be unmade with patience, kindness, and the stubborn human belief that everyone deserved a second chance. Chris finished his notes and stood up. "Come on," he said to the Void Reaper. "Let us go tell the others about tomorrow. They should know they are getting a new family member." The creature followed him through the station, walking freely through corridors where it had once been feared. Station personnel nodded greetings as they passed. The Galaxy Killer nodded back. In the habitat area, Chris gathered all 5 creatures together. They settled around him in a loose circle, attentive and calm. Chris pulled out his tablet and showed them images of the Bone Crusher. "This is our new arrival," he said. "It has been hurt badly. It will be scared and angry. We need to show it that things can be different here. Can you all help me with that?" 5 very different creatures, each one designed or evolved to be dangerous, all made sounds of agreement. The Void Reaper placed one careful claw on Chris's shoulder, a gesture of support, of partnership, of family. Chris looked at them all and felt something warm settle in his chest. They had come so far, all of them, and they still had so much further to go. But they would do it together, one creature at a time, one act of kindness at a time, one snack offered to a monster that had forgotten anyone could be gentle. That was the human way, and slowly, carefully, the galaxy was learning to follow. The station's crew gathered around, keeping their distance but watching with new eyes. They had all feared the Void Reaper. Now they had seen it risk itself to save others. Captain Hayes, the human woman from the transport ship, approached carefully. "I do not understand," she said, looking at the creature. "Why did it help us?" Chris stood, still a bit unsteady. Because someone asked it to, and because it chose to be more than what it was made for. He looked at the Void Reaper, at the intelligence shining in those glowing eyes. "We all get to make that choice, even Galaxy Killers." "Then I guess I will deal with that when it happens," Chris said. "But I do not think I am wrong. I think this creature is tired of being a weapon. I think it wants something different, and I am going to help it find that." Hal left without another word. Chris watched him go, then turned back to the Void Reaper. "You heard that, right?" Chris said to the creature. "No pressure, but I just bet my life that you are more than what they made you to be." The Void Reaper moved closer to the barrier. It placed one massive claw against the energy field, and Chris matched the gesture, his human hand pressed against the barrier across from the claw. They stayed like that for a while, 2 beings separated by everything that should matter, connected by something that mattered more. Booth. The Void Reaper was moved to the combat arena, a massive dome designed for war games. Chris followed, his stomach tight with worry. He had spent weeks building trust with this creature, helping it heal. Now they were going to throw it into a simulated battle. Everything could be undone in minutes. In the arena, the Void Reaper stood in the center, looking around at the unfamiliar space. Its body language showed confusion and rising stress. The bright lights, the open space, the armed soldiers surrounding it, all of it triggered memories of pain and fear. Hal entered the control booth with Chris and several observers. Through the transparent walls, they could see his team taking positions around the arena. 6 of the best warriors, armed with non-lethal weapons designed to subdue without killing. "We will demonstrate how trained soldiers handle a creature that has destroyed worlds," Hal said to the observers. "Watch and learn." He pressed a button, and the exercise began. The Void Reaper suddenly found itself alone in a hostile environment with armed warriors approaching from all sides. For a moment, it froze. Then 3 years of pain and fear came rushing back, and the creature remembered what it had been taught. It attacked. Hal's skin went dark with rage. "You will do no such thing. That creature is military property, and you have no authority over it." "Actually," Chris said calmly, "I do. Station regulations say any living cargo must meet minimum welfare standards. Director will want to see my report by the end of the day." He walked out of the bay before Hal could respond, leaving the commander furious and his soldiers confused. In the cage, the Void Reaper watched the door where the strange human had left. Something in its chest felt different. After 3 years of pain and hunger and fear, someone had asked if it wanted food. It did not understand what had just happened. But somewhere deep in its mind, in the part that remembered before the took it, before the chains and the collar and the endless pain, something old and nearly forgotten stirred to life. Hope,